Welcome to the Making Kids Count podcast, brought to you by Kentucky Youth Advocates, where we sit down with policymakers, community leaders, and youth to discuss ideas to make Kentucky the best place to be young.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Making Kids Count podcast with Kentucky Youth Advocates. My name is Alicia Whatley. I'm going to be leading our conversation today. And before we dive in and introduce our guests that we have with us for today's episode, I wanted to give a quick reminder to all of our listeners about where we are in the Kentucky General Assembly. You've probably been seeing lots of updates from KYA over the last several weeks. It is a busy time in Frankfort right now. We are, as of today, recording on day 52 of a 60-day legislative session. So we are getting down to the wire on the last few days, the last few things kind of moving through the process. And for those who've been following along, you know that in this longer 60-day session, our legislators in Frankfort are tasked with not only looking at all of the pieces of legislation that are filed, all of the bills that are coming through, but also crafting a 2-year state budget. And all of that has to be done before April 15th when they are done for the year. So a lot to do still in Frankfort over the next couple of weeks. And so as we've been monitoring and paying attention to what's going on in Frankfort, we know there's lots of topics that have been kind of rising to the top of discussions. And one of the things that's gained a lot of attention in Frankfort this year is really around nutrition. And that is kind of across the board. We've seen bills filed on things like school meals, accessible community grocery stores, the Food is Medicine program, and also prioritizing Kentucky grown products in all sorts of different spaces. And so today we're really excited because we're joined by some of the key partners that we have across the state and experts really in the realm of nutrition. And so I'm going to let them do a quick self-intro, but I'll just name you all and say kind of who you're here with before we get into that as well. So today we are joined by 3 folks, guests on our podcast for the day. And the first, Stephanie Utley, who is the Director of School Nutrition at LaRue County Schools. And she's also the President of the Kentucky School Nutrition Association. And then we have Senator Jason Howell, who represents District 1, and that includes Callaway, Crittenden, Fulton, Graves, Hickman, Lyon, and Trigg counties. I think I got them all in there. And he also serves as the chair of the Senate Agriculture Committee. And then last but not least, we have Kentucky's Commissioner of Agriculture, Jonathan Schell, who has served in this role since 2024. So we're really excited to have all of you here today with us. And I'm just going to go ahead and intro the topic very briefly before we let you all do a self-introduction. So as many of you all know that are listening today, March is National Nutrition Month, so it's a great time to kind of start talking about this and be raising awareness. And we're hosting the conversation today on child nutrition in Kentucky. And we really want to do a couple of things: uplift the opportunities that we're seeing, the great work that's already happening in Kentucky, and also highlighting some of the barriers and ways that we could continue to work on getting kids access to nutritious meals in all the spaces that they are every day. And so each of our guests represents sort of a different part of that landscape of nutrition for Kentucky kids. So we're excited to be bringing together multiple voices for this conversation today. So as I said, I'm going to let you all do a quick introduction of yourself. So if you want to just tell us beyond your name and who you are, as I mentioned, anything else that you would like to share with our listeners, and also, if it's not too cheesy, maybe your favorite meal for Nutrition Month or your favorite food, whether it's nutritious or not. I'll start with you, Stephanie.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me today. My name is Stephanie Utley. I'm the Director of School Nutrition in LaRue County Schools, which is smack dab in the middle of the state in Hodgenville, Kentucky. I'm also, like she said, the President of the Kentucky School Nutrition Association, which has about 2,500 members. We're one of the largest in the country. And we are very into advocacy, and we work well with Commissioner Schell. He is a great advocate, and Senator Howell as well. And I've been doing this job about 10 years, and to be honest, when I got into it, I had no idea what I was getting into, and I will say this: you don't know what it is until you're in it. Yeah, yeah. Commissioner's shaking his head. He's learned a lot meeting with us. My favorite meal. I could talk all day, so you can interrupt me. Tacos, 100%, all the time.
Love it.
All the
Love
time.
it.
All the
Senator
time.
Howell, how about you?
Yeah, in addition to what you talked about, even though I'm no longer engaged in production agriculture, I grew up on a farm grain and some animal production, and worked with my dad until he retired about 8 years ago or so. Happy to be in this space. My favorite school meal, without a doubt, and I'm not a poster child for health when I talk about this, but the chicken tetrazzini was great. Um, Especially in my elementary school out in the country, our lunch ladies made these oatmeal date cookies. Instead of oatmeal raisins, we got dates in the 70s from some exchange program. And the oatmeal date cookies they made were just brilliant and have never been replicated. That the ability to make those died with those three ladies, unfortunately.
I love the call out to your favorite school meal. That's amazing. And Commissioner Shell.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. And I just want to say to start with how great of a partner Stephanie and the School Nutrition Association has been to us. When she says it's complicated, it is absolutely complicated. It is one of the most complicated systems that I have ever been a part of, trying to dissect and find ways that we can be helpful. And they've been an unbelievable resource. They are unsung heroes all across Kentucky and all across America, our school nutrition directors and their staffs and the lunch ladies and guys who are in there cooking every single day. It's just truly amazing the work that they put in. And, they have a special bond with their students and the way that they are able to connect with them. So Stephanie, thank you so much for the work that you all have done. And Senator Howell has been nothing but an open door and an open mind in trying to find some of the fixes and the breaking the barriers that we have found. And so this has been a really enjoyable process that we've gone through this year. And I just absolutely love the idea that one day we will be able to sit in a school cafeteria and every meal that comes through there, that we know where it comes from. We know that farmer, we know how it got there. We know it's nutritious, and we know that we're giving these kids every leg up that we can to be able to study and learn at the highest ability possible. And given that economic opportunity for our local farmers and agriculture community and our local communities across the state, it's a passion of mine, and we're not going to stop until we see that come to fruition.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think our viewers can probably see this morning, those who are watching the video, that you're actually on your farm this morning getting some of your work done as you're joining us. So we appreciate you taking some time. So I'm gonna just go ahead and dive in. I really appreciate the kind of setup from everyone. It sounds like everyone on the call has already been working pretty collaboratively together across your different kind of realms of nutrition. So Stephanie, I'd like to start with you. And it sounds like as you said, like we could talk all day about what it means to be in school nutrition. There's so much there. But could you help some of our listeners understand just kind of the role that school meals can play in child nutrition, and why is this such an important space for us to be thinking about right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I could, again, talk about it all day, every day. I'm very, very passionate about it. I think a lot of people that are in it know, and I will say this for the people that don't, school meals, if you think about it, are really one of the most consistent and reliable sources of nutrition for kids across Kentucky, I mean, across the United States. For many students, especially in rural and lower income communities, breakfast and lunch at school is typically the most balanced meal they get. They receive all day, and we see it, in those communities, especially on Monday morning, when we're out for snow breaks and stuff like that. It's a very vital thing for our communities. And beyond just feeding the kids, I mean, school nutrition programs support academic success. I think we can all, as adults, say that when we're hungry, we don't focus. And I know that may sound trivial, but it is what it is. If you're hungry, you can't focus. You misbehave, all of that stuff. Ultimately you perform better when you're not hungry. So what we do is directly tied to education. It's not separate. It's a whole unit. I will say one of the biggest programs that help us do this work is the community eligibility provision, which is CEP, and it allows high need schools to serve free meals to students without requiring applications, which I think we all probably remember doing when we were in school. They would send that stuff home at the beginning of the year. And now with this, we're able to reduce stigma, and increase participation to make sure that more kids have access to healthy meals. And other programs that I'll also mention real quick, I don't think people realize directly tie into us, is programs like SNAP. They play a big role. When families have access to SNAP, it supports food security at home, and it also helps schools qualify for CEP. which expands access to free meals in the cafeteria. So it's a really big interconnected system. What happens at home and what happens at school, I mean, they go hand in hand. And I think that just talking about it more will
Yeah. Yeah, I
educate.
appreciate that. I think it's really helpful to kind of just give that baseline understanding because a lot of folks don't understand all the factors that kind of go into like what brings
Mhm.
those meals to the cafeterias across the state, and just how important the role is that you all are playing in schools. And again, I think you could probably talk for a pretty long time about this question, but if there were one or two things that you wanted to highlight as far as some of the barriers that make it that schools are facing, I would say, to provide nutritious meals and or incorporate more locally grown foods, which we know has been a priority in this state. And we would love to see more farmers connected with school meals. Is there something you want to highlight there that's something you would still love to see work happen on?
I think uh, for me personally, I mean, there's a few major challenges, and I think it's broad across the entire state and nation. Mainly is cost. I mean, we're all seeing that when we go to the grocery store. Food costs are up, labor costs are up, equipment costs are up. Um, I'll throw this in there real quick. People may think we don't want to share our kitchens, but if someone breaks my $40,000 oven, who's going to fix it? And so people just don't think about that kind of stuff. Um, all of that stuff has increased significantly, but our reimbursement rates haven't really jumped as significant as everything else, which, sometimes makes it a little difficult to consistently offer high quality fresh foods. Um, Second is staffing. I'm advocating for the state with this. Thankfully, in my district, I've got an incredible team. We're great. I haven't had a lot of trouble with staffing, but I know a lot of districts that do. And that's like a lot of industries right now, workforce shortages, and it takes trained staff to be able to prepare scratch-made meals. You can't, it takes a lot to get all that going. And when it comes to incorporating locally grown foods, I work closely with my FFA department. They're actually taking a couple, I'm throwing this in as my own little plug here. They're taking a couple pigs to be slaughtered for me this week, actually. And I have another farmer that I work with, but I'm very passionate about it. But there are definitely hurdles. It's more expensive. It's harder to source consistently. You'd be surprised how many farmers I've reached out to and just inquiring about like, hi, can you are a blueberry farmer? They don't realize how much we use. Um, and that's a huge barrier that I've dealt with. They don't realize the quantity that even my small district of, you know, 2,400 students, we go through a lot of food.
Sure.
We go through a lot. Um, and there's regulatory, procurement requirements that come to that. But for me personally, that hasn't been a huge barrier. Um, but it is complicated. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
farm
there's
school initiatives are making great progress. We just need a little more conversation around them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation today because we know there's a lot of really good work already happening, a lot of
There
smaller
is.
initiatives happening in schools across the state, but also some opportunities to continue to make it an easier process and a more affordable and accessible
Mhm.
process for schools. And so I think with that, I think it's a great segue to jump to Senator Howell and ask if you would just talk a little bit to our listeners about Senate Bill 5, which is very close to reaching the finish line. It's had bipartisan support across chambers, which is very exciting, certainly a priority piece of legislation this year. And I think that a big reason behind that bill, I'd love to hear you talk more about it, is kind of trying to make it a little bit easier, maybe a first step to making it easier for schools to purchase those local foods through the procurement process. So, talk to us about that bill. Why is that a priority for you, and what do you see it doing for Kentucky?
Yeah, I would love to. This bill has been a long time in the making, and I can't say enough about Commissioner Shell's leadership and all of his staff as well. This sort of thing's been discussed a lot of times for a number of years, but Commissioner Shell has not just the desire, but the commitment to allocate enough staff resources and everything else to make this come about and go the distance. And that was completely evident in the interim when he and his staff are working through all these issues. And none of this would have happened without him. In a lot of ways, I get to take credit for the hard work of so many others in working out the details. Big bill in impact, short bill in words, it's a half a page long. And it opens up the procurement statute in the state of Kentucky on a limited basis to allow our school districts to better forward contract with producers. It's a perfect segue to Stephanie's comments about working out supply and demand and having a better understanding of supply and demand. A lot of that can't happen without forward contracting. In the grain industry, if I were still farming, I would have probably 70% of my 2026 crop sold right now without ever having planted the first seed. In the produce market, in the produce arena, we could not do that because of the state procurement statute. We could not do that effectively, and this makes those changes.
Yeah, we're really excited to see, like I said, just such great support among the legislature for this bill moving forward. And I know when we've talked to you individually about it, it is sort of a first step in a process that you kind of see, in the future as to continue to make it easier for schools. So, are there any other opportunities that you want to highlight, maybe down the road, or what comes next for you as we continue to work through ways to make it easier to get these fresh foods to schools?
Yes, a couple of different things. One, just in the immediate impact, one of the things that Stephanie talked about and Commissioner Shell talked about a little bit too, we have way too many children in the Commonwealth of Kentucky who rely on the schools for their primary source of nutrition. A lot of times they don't eat without this, without the school servicing, not just during the week during school time, but on weekends we send care packages home for nutrition during the weekends. And a lot of these kids are involved in summer programs and everything with school where we can feed them there. I think there's some good synergies there. It's unfortunate our growing season and our school season don't overlap because our primary growing season for a lot of these products are in the summer. But I think that some of our children that are in the food insecurity arena will be able to take advantage of that a lot more too, and maybe introduce them to some additional foods into their diet. In these demographics, it's very difficult to introduce fresh fruits and vegetables because of the cost structure. So I'm hoping that will change not just the immediate nutrition, but kind of the habits that we form as children that we take with us into adulthood. Down the line, I'm really excited about this bill because I think it has the obvious direct impact for feeding kids in schools, but it has some long-term consequences because I think this is a good lever to help us build out our producer and processor arena in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In the food production arenas, there are a lot of people that are in this on varying levels, but to be able to have a consistent contractual relationship to provide foods will help solidify our producer market and make it the things that Stephanie was talking about, nobody having an idea of how much of a particular food that you could use in the school system. That market, I think that knowledge-based market will clarify itself very rapidly, and being able to contract with the school systems will give the financial security to the producers to really ramp up.
Yeah, it's very exciting to hear kind of about what is to come. As I said, this bill is probably the first step in several things that you all are really interested in working on. We're always excited to kind of hear about that. And I
To a
want to
cattle
go to
farmer like Commissioner Shell, it's more like opening the gate rather than the first step. Now we'll get to running.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to go to Commissioner Shell next because, your role as the Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner and just kind of your office and your staff, the other two have referenced several times how helpful your work has been in their spaces. So can you just talk to us a little bit, highlight some of the work that has been happening that's been alluded to in this conversation? How is the commission working with farmers and schools and local communities to really improve child nutrition? Talk a little bit about those initiatives.
Yeah, so what we're probably most excited about is a lot of what Jason said and what Stephanie said around procurement and around sourcing and forward contracting. There's a big fallacy in most of our communities across the state of Kentucky around local foods costing more, and the reason that it does in most cases is because you're doing spot purchasing. So you've got a farmer who is raising 2 acres of tomatoes, and he's selling at the farmer's market at a retail pricing. It's a quality product, and so he's getting a premium for that. So what happens is you have a school district, you have a restaurant, you have a grocery store, whoever that large purchaser may be that calls and says, hey, I need tomatoes. And they have an opportunity cost that they have to factor in now, that they can either sell it at a wholesale price or retail price, and they're going to sell it at that retail price for that premium. What we want to do is to be able to work on, through the procurement changes with our school districts, to put together a system in place that directly focuses on forward contracting for our farmers, so that Stephanie, as a school nutrition director, can start in October or November for the following school year before planting season, and she can go to them and say, hey, you're a blueberry farmer, we want to purchase 1,000 bushels of blueberries next year, and we want to do that 50 bushels at a time every 2 weeks. And so they can start to work on how do they plan that out for their growing operation so that they can supply that large demand that our schools have across the state of Kentucky. We're also working with the co-ops at the school district level regionally to see if we can put those things together to get even larger contracts for farmers to have that security in their growing season, to put those forward contracts together. And then at the other end of it, something that Jason said that I think we're probably the most excited about is this is an economic development opportunity, not just on farm with our school districts and the purchases that they have for profitability for our farmers, but also for our communities to have economic development opportunities for further processing of our materials that we have in ag to get them food service ready. So when you think about broccoli, for instance, if we sent Stephanie a truckload of broccoli, she would have to have 1, 2, 3 more employees there chopping them up, put them into florets, and then boiling them or whatever they're going to do to cook them and get them ready for their school nutrition packets and their lunches that they're doing. So what we want to do is to work with economic developers across the state of Kentucky to gather the data and information on what school nutritionists like Stephanie and others across the state of Kentucky on how much quantity that they need in certain levels and how they receive it in their cafeterias, so that then we can go out and start recruiting companies or building companies up in the state of Kentucky that can provide and produce that. What that does is not only get us from a seasonality that Jason was talking about, Senator Howell, to where that we can only produce and sell during those 3 to 5 months, 6 months that we're actually operational in Kentucky when our schools aren't in session, but getting it to where that we can flash freeze or we can and we can do things to where that it can create a 12-month selling season off of a 6-month growing season. And so those are the things that we're doing on top of trying to help source with school districts across the state of Kentucky with our people at the department who are sourcing specific, who help get Kentucky Proud or local growers involved. And then also working with farmers to kind of conglomerate them together, excuse me, not necessarily co-op them, but kind of conglomerate together so that we can specialize in certain products. If Stephanie's going to need the equivalent of in their co-op or their district or statewide 100 acres of green beans, well, maybe we need 3 or 4 farmers doing that instead of 100 farmers, and then other farmers can do tomatoes and others can do others, and start to specialize so that we can get that economies of scale down so that you can buy the specific equipment that you need in order to produce and process these materials so that we can get them in there. So we're trying to take a holistic global view of this, of how we radically change the system that we're in currently so that we can get more of a decentralized system and more of a local opportunity for our communities, our school districts, our kids, and our farmers.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think, it brings to light, like all of you have kind of mentioned, just how complex this system is, but also how important it is to bring nutritious meals to kids across the state. And we heard from Stephanie early on in the conversation that kids are relying on this every day, and it often is a large source of their meals throughout the day, if not, most of what they're eating throughout the week. So I appreciate you all kind of taking the time to dig into this today and talk a little bit about the specifics. And as we are going to wrap up the conversation shortly, I want to have each of you maybe give me your 1 minute or less, kind of what have you not already shared that kind of brings you hope or excitement about this work right now. Senator Howell, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. My elevator pitch is easy. I'm probably as excited about this as I would be having another oatmeal day cookie from Casey Elementary School. And it's the ability to grow out the depth in this market and what that means to our rural communities, especially. I think that this has the opportunity in a lot of our counties to put a hard floor in some of the economic and population declines that we've seen and build off of that. The vertical integration of production agriculture in Kentucky is something that's been long overdue, and being able to be a new arena, we can kind of craft this to be an all-in combination to provide enough depth to the market, not just for schools, but to expand out from there to other purchasers.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely touches more than just those kids in schools. It's a small part of a very large system that everything has to be working together. So we appreciate that perspective. Stephanie, what about you? Anything that you want to give our listeners as a last thought for the day?
I think the biggest hope for me right now is that this conversation is happening, and Commissioner Shell is kind of spearheading it in the sense that it's just a miscommunication. And if we can get the two sides together, I really have hope that this can happen, because we are in school every day. We're a consistent source of income for these farmers too. They don't have to take it to a retail market and hope that they sell it all. They will sell it to us if we can get this partnership going. And I'm just excited that we're actually having some really meaningful conversations about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good when a couple of parties come together and realize they really have the same goals. And like you said, if we can just
Right.
be on the same page about how to get there, so
Mhm.
much can be done. And Commissioner Shell, any last thoughts from you as we're wrapping up today?
Yeah, I think two things that are adjacent to this that many people wouldn't think about in the process that we're doing that's going to have a huge impact is one on farmland preservation, of being able to get younger, new, beginning, and even our older farmers as we pass farmland down from generation to generation or look at buying new farmland and using that, the decline that we've had in it. I think this is one tool to be able to curb that, because we've got more profitability, more interest involved. And this could be a huge asset for farmland preservation across the state of Kentucky and across America if we can figure this out the right way. The second one is on the health of our kids. And then later on, the health of our adults. As we see a large population of Medicaid here in the state of Kentucky with a lot of our less resourced individuals, we see a large population on Medicare with our seniors. We have the opportunity to really put them on a healthy trajectory with the school meals that we have, so that as they get older and they're introduced to maybe some healthier options in our schools, that they're using those healthy options as they get older in life. And we can start to see a decline in some of the chronic illnesses that we see, and obesity, heart disease, stroke, and others. And I think it's something, diabetes, it's something that I'm really optimistic about, that flows directly and perfectly into our food as medicine work that we're doing as well. So I think those are two things that we'll see as an adjacent benefit based off of what we're doing in school nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that broader perspective that school nutrition has such a lifelong impact for these kids that we're talking about. So not only the immediate to focus in the classroom and be present at school, but also kind of what that looks like for the trajectory of their health and their understanding of food and their choices throughout their lifetime. And so with that, I'm going to close this out for the day. I want to thank all three of our guests for being here. Again, you all bring various perspectives to an issue. It sounds like you're all already working very closely together on. And I will tell our listeners that, as we mentioned, Senate Bill 5 is very close to reaching final passage in the legislature. So continue to keep an eye on that one over the next couple of weeks as they wrap up in Frankfurt. And thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Making Kids Count podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Making Kids Count podcast. For more information and to listen to more episodes, visit kyyouth.org/podcast. To support this podcast and our mission as the independent voice for Kentucky kids, please consider making a gift at kyyouth.org/donate.